I received a package with my name on it. No return address. Inside was something I lost years ago, something only one person could have found. When I looked up their address, the house was empty. The box sat on my porch like a landmine. Brown cardboard, standard shipping tape, my name printed in a font I didn't recognize. No logo, no tracking number visible. Just my address in Calibri or something equally generic. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen table. The weight was wrong. Too light for what I thought it might be, too heavy for junk mail. I got a knife from the drawer and cut through the tape in one clean line. Inside, wrapped in bubble wrap, was my father's compass. Not a compass like my father's. His actual compass. The brass one with the dent on the northwest quadrant where he'd dropped it on a job site in 1987. The one with his initials scratched into the bottom casing, DRH David Robert Hale. The one I'd kept in my truck's glove compartment until 5 years ago, when the truck got totaled and the insurance company sent everything to storage. The storage unit I'd shared with my son. The storage unit he'd cleaned out when I was recovering from the accident. I turned the compass over. The initials were still there, barely visible under years of handling. My father had carried this thing on every job for 30 years. When he died, it became mine. When I nearly died, it became… what? Lost, misplaced, stolen. I set it down and looked at the box again. No note, no explanation. Just the compass, returned to me like a piece of evidence. My son, Tyler, was the only person who'd had access to that storage unit. He'd volunteered to handle everything while I was in the hospital. 6 weeks of recovery, 6 weeks of him sorting through my life, deciding what mattered and what didn't. He'd told me most of it was junk. Water-damaged boxes, old tools, paperwork from jobs I'd finished a decade ago. He said he'd donated what he could and tossed the rest. I'd believed him because I'd been too tired to argue. Now I was holding proof that he'd lied. I pulled out my phone and looked up his address. Tyler and his wife, Vanessa, had moved 2 years ago to a house across town. One of those new developments with names like Willows Creek or Magnolia Heights. I'd been there once for a housewarming party that felt more like a staged photo shoot than a celebration. Everything white and gray, furniture that looked expensive but uncomfortable, a kitchen bigger than my living room. I pulled up the address on my map app and hit directions. 18 minutes in current traffic. I grabbed my keys. The drive gave me time to think, which was probably a mistake. My brain started pulling threads, connecting things I'd ignored because ignoring them had been easier than facing them. The storage unit hadn't been the first thing Tyler had handled for me. After the accident, he'd also taken over my mail, my bills, my insurance paperwork. He'd been helpful, efficient. I'd thanked him. I'd signed things he'd brought me without reading them too carefully. Power of attorney for medical decisions. Temporary access to my bank account so he could pay my mortgage while I was laid up. Standard stuff, reasonable stuff. Except now I was wondering what else I'd signed. The new development looked the same as every other one that had sprung up in the past decade. Cookie-cutter houses with identical floor plans, lawns that were too green, driveways that were too clean. Tyler's house was near the back, a corner lot with a 2-car garage and a door painted navy blue. I parked on the street and walked up the driveway. The lawn was perfect. The mailbox was empty. The windows were dark. I rang the doorbell and waited. Nothing. I rang again, then knocked. Still nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. I walked around to the side gate, but it was latched from the inside. I went back to the front and peered through the window next to the door. Empty. Not just nobody home empty. Completely empty. No furniture, no curtains, no pictures on the walls. Just bare floors and blank walls and the kind of silence that meant nobody had been here in a while. I stepped back and looked at the house again. The lawn was maintained. The mailbox was clean. But the house itself felt abandoned. I walked to the neighbor's door and knocked. An older woman answered, maybe 70, wearing a cardigan despite the mild weather. Help you? She asked. I'm looking for the people who live next door, I said. Tyler and Vanessa Hale. Have you seen them? She frowned. The young couple? They moved out 2 months ago, maybe 3. Left in the middle of the night, practically. I woke up one morning and there was a moving truck in the driveway. By noon they were gone. Did they say where they were going? Didn't say anything, didn't even wave goodbye. My husband tried to talk to them while they were loading up, but they just ignored him. Rude, if you ask me. I thanked her and walked back to my truck. 2 months ago, maybe 3. Right around the time I'd started noticing other things. Small things. A credit card statement that didn't match my spending. A missed call from my bank about unusual activity. A letter from a property management company about a building I didn't own anymore. I'd chalked it all up to confusion. Mistakes. But now I was starting to think the fog had been intentional. A smokescreen. I sat in my truck and pulled up Tyler's number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I tried Vanessa. Same result. I opened my email and scrolled back through the past 6 months, looking for anything from either of them. The last message was from 3 months ago, a forward of a family newsletter, the kind Vanessa sent out every holiday with photos of their vacations and updates about their jobs. I'd skimmed it and deleted it. Now I read it carefully. There was a line near the end about exciting changes ahead, new opportunities, a fresh start. I opened my banking app and checked my accounts. Everything looked normal at first glance. My checking account had the usual balance. My savings account was untouched. But when I clicked on the details, I noticed a transfer I didn't remember making. $5,000 moved from savings to checking 3 months ago. The memo line said, property tax payment. I didn't own any property that required a $5,000 tax payment. I called my bank. The automated system put me on hold for 7 minutes before a human picked up. I explained the situation. The representative pulled up my account and confirmed the transfer. She also confirmed that it had been authorized using my online banking credentials. Was that you, Mr. Hale? She asked. No, I said. Do you know who might have accessed your account? I thought about Tyler sitting in my hospital room, my phone on the table next to him, my passwords saved in a notebook I'd kept in the nightstand drawer because I could never remember them. Yeah, I said. I know. I hung up and drove home. My house felt different when I walked in. Not unsafe, exactly, but compromised. Like someone had been through it while I wasn't looking, moving things around just enough to make me doubt my own memory. I went to my office and pulled out the filing cabinet where I kept important documents. Tax returns, insurance policies, the deed to my house. I started going through everything, checking dates and signatures and details I'd ignored because I'd trusted the person handling them. The deed to my house was dated 8 months ago, a refinance. I remembered signing the paperwork, remembered Tyler explaining that the new terms would lower my monthly payment and give me access to some of the equity. What I didn't remember was signing away partial ownership, but there it was, in the fine print, Tyler's name, listed as a co-owner. I kept digging. The property management letter was about a small commercial building I'd bought 15 years ago as an investment, a strip mall on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but it had been paid off for years and generated decent rental income. Except according to the letter, the building had been sold 4 months ago. The new owners were asking about keys and maintenance records. I'd never sold that building. I found the sale documents in the filing cabinet, buried under a stack of utility bills. My signature was on every page. The date was from last year, right after the accident. The buyer was an LLC. I looked up the name online and found nothing. No website, no records, no address. Just a shell company. The kind you set up when you don't want anyone to know who's really behind it. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. My son had taken my father's compass. He'd emptied a storage unit and told me it was junk. He'd moved out of his house without telling me. He'd transferred money from my accounts. He'd added his name to my house deed. He'd sold my property using my signature. And then he'd sent me the compass. Not as a taunt, as a test. To see if I'd stay quiet, to see if I'd notice, to see if I'd do anything about it. I picked up the compass and turned it over in my hands. The brass was warm from being in my pocket. The needle spun lazily before settling on north. My father used to say a compass only worked if you knew where you were starting from. You couldn't get anywhere if you didn't know where you stood. I knew where I stood now. I opened my laptop and started making a list. The first thing I did was stop asking why. Why didn't matter. Why was a trap that would keep me spinning in circles, trying to rationalize something that couldn't be rationalized. Tyler had done this because he'd wanted to, because he'd thought he could, because I'd been vulnerable, and he'd seen an opportunity. The second thing I did was figure out what hurt most. Not me. I'd already been hurt. The damage was done. But Tyler and Vanessa had built something in the past 5 years, a life, an image. They'd constructed a version of themselves that mattered to them more than anything else. Successful, put together. The kind of couple who sent out holiday newsletters with professional photos and updates about promotions and vacation homes. That's what I needed to dismantle. I spent 3 days going through every document I could find. Bank statements, legal papers, emails I'd archived and forgotten about. I made spreadsheets. I tracked dates. I built a timeline of everything Tyler had done, starting with the accident and ending with the empty house. The storage unit had been first. He'd cleaned it out while I was still in the hospital, told me it was mostly junk. What he'd actually done was take anything valuable and either sell it or keep it. The compass had probably been an afterthought, something he'd found later and decided to use. Then came the refinance on my house. I'd signed the papers without reading them carefully because Tyler had explained it as a way to lower my payments. What he hadn't explained was that adding his name to the deed meant he'd own half the house when I died, or before, if he could find a way to force a sale. The commercial building had been next. Another signature obtained while I was barely functional, another asset transferred to an LLC I couldn't trace. I'd done some digging and found that the LLC had been registered in Delaware, which meant the real owners could stay anonymous. But the timing lined up perfectly with Tyler's move to the new house. The sale price had been $240,000. The down payment on his house had been $200,000. He'd sold my building to buy his house. The bank transfers had come later, smaller amounts scattered over months. 1,000 here, 2,000 there. Nothing big enough to trigger an alert, but enough to add up. I estimated he'd taken about 30,000 in total, maybe more if I went back further. I called a lawyer. Not the family lawyer Tyler had probably been using, a different one. A woman named Patricia Drummond who specialized in elder fraud and financial exploitation. I wasn't elderly, but the principle was the same. Someone in a position of trust had used that trust to steal from me. We met in her office downtown. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a handshake that meant business. I laid out everything I'd found. She took notes and asked questions and didn't waste time on sympathy. "How much of this can you prove?" she asked. "All of it. I have the documents, bank records, signatures I didn't authorize." "Did you sign the documents?" "Technically, yes. But I was on medication. I wasn't in a state to understand what I was signing." She nodded. "That's duress. We can argue that. But here's the problem. Your son will claim you gave him permission. He'll say you asked him to handle your affairs while you recovered. He'll say you knew what you were signing and just don't remember because of the medication. So I can't prove it. You can prove the transfers happened. You can prove he benefited financially. But proving he did it without your consent? That's harder, especially if he has paperwork showing you gave him power of attorney." I'd already found that paperwork. A medical power of attorney that I'd signed in the hospital, thinking it was standard procedure. It gave Tyler the authority to make medical decisions if I couldn't. What I hadn't realized was that he'd also slipped in a general power of attorney that gave him access to my finances. "What are my options?" I asked. "You can file a civil suit. Try to recover the money and the property, but that'll take time. Years, probably, and there's no guarantee you'll win. Or you can file a criminal complaint. Report him for fraud and theft. That might move faster, but it's also a higher burden of proof." "What would you do?" She leaned back in her chair. "Honestly, I'd document everything and then decide if it's worth the fight. Because here's the thing. Even if you win, you're not getting your son back. You're not fixing the relationship. You're just making it official that it's over." I thought about that. The relationship was already over. It had ended the moment Tyler decided I was worth more to him as a source of money than as a father. The only question was whether I wanted to make him pay for it. "I want to make him pay," I said. She nodded. "Then let's start with the documentation. I'll need copies of everything you have. Bank statements, deeds, sale documents, medical records showing you were on medication when you signed things. The more we have, the better." I spent the next week gathering everything she needed. I made copies, scanned files, organized folders. It was tedious work, but it gave me something to focus on besides the growing anger that sat in my chest like a stone. I also started watching Tyler's social media. I hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now I scrolled through years of posts, looking for clues. Most of it was exactly what I expected. Photos of vacations, dinners at expensive restaurants, carefully staged shots of their house and their cars and their life. Vanessa posted more than Tyler did. She had a whole aesthetic going. Neutral colors, minimalist design, captions about gratitude and growth and living your best life. It was all performance, and the audience ate it up. Hundreds of likes on every post, comments from friends and strangers telling them how beautiful they were, how lucky, how inspiring. I found the post from 3 months ago, the one about exciting changes and fresh starts. The comments were full of people asking what was happening, where they were going, what the big news was. Vanessa had responded to a few of them with vague answers. "Just taking a leap of faith, and we'll share more soon." There were no updates after that. No posts about the move, no photos of a new house. Their accounts had gone quiet. Not deleted, just dormant. That told me they were trying to disappear, not completely, not in a way that would raise red flags, just enough to make it hard for anyone to find them if they came looking. I went back to Patricia with what I'd found. She agreed it was suspicious, but not necessarily proof of anything criminal. People moved. People went quiet on social media. It didn't mean they were running. "Do you know where they are now?" she asked. "No. I've tried calling. Their numbers are disconnected. I drove by the old house. It's empty." "What about work? Do you know where your son was employed?" I didn't. Tyler had worked in finance, something vague and corporate that I'd never fully understood. I remembered him mentioning a firm downtown, but I couldn't remember the name. I called a few places and asked if they had a Tyler Hale on staff. None of them did. Vanessa had been easier to track. She worked in marketing for a tech startup. I found the company's website and called their main line. The receptionist told me Vanessa had left the company 2 months ago. 2 months, right around the time they'd moved out of the house. I asked if they had a forwarding address or a way to contact her. The receptionist said they didn't give out that information. I thanked her and hung up. I was starting to see the shape of it now. Tyler and Vanessa had planned this. They'd spent months, maybe years, setting it up. Taking what they could while I was vulnerable, then disappearing before I could figure it out. The compass had been a miscalculation, or maybe it had been intentional. A way to let me know they'd won without having to face me. Either way, it meant they thought I wouldn't do anything about it. They thought I'd stay quiet, accept it, move on. They were wrong. I went back to the commercial building I used to own. It was on the south side of town, a small strip mall with 4 units, a dry cleaner, a nail salon, a pizza place, and a vacant space that had been cycling through tenants for years. I'd bought it cheap during the recession and held on to it because the rental income covered the mortgage and then some. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. The new owners had painted the exterior. Gray instead of beige, modern instead of dated. The signs were new too. I parked across the street and watched for a while. The dry cleaner was busy. The nail salon had a steady stream of customers. The pizza place looked the same as it always had. I crossed the street and went into the dry cleaner. The owner, a Vietnamese woman named Lynn, recognized me immediately. "Mr. Hale," she said, "I haven't seen you in a long time." "I've been away," I said. "How's business?" "Good. Busy. The new owners, they raised the rent a little, but it's okay. We manage." "When did that happen? The rent increase?" 2 months ago. They sent a letter, said the building was under new management and they were adjusting the rates to market value." "How much did it go up?" $200 a month. It's not too bad. Some of the other tenants, they got bigger increases." I thanked her and left. $200 a month didn't sound like much, but multiplied by 4 units over a year, it added up. Tyler wasn't just sitting on the building. He was squeezing it for profit. I drove to the county assessor's office and pulled the property records. The building had been sold 4 months ago for $240,000. The buyer was listed as Clearview Holdings, LLC. I wrote down the name and went home to search for it. Clearview Holdings had no website, no listed officers, no public records beyond the property deed. But when I dug deeper, I found a registered agent, a law firm downtown. I recognized the name. It was the same firm Tyler had used for the refinance on my house. I called the firm and asked to speak to someone about Clearview Holdings. The receptionist put me through to a junior associate who sounded fresh out of law school. "I'm calling about a property owned by Clearview Holdings," I said. "I used to own the building and I'm trying to get in touch with the current owners." "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out that information. Client confidentiality." "I'm not asking for names. I just want to know if there's a way to contact them. A business address, maybe." "I can't help you with that." I thanked him and hung up, but not a permanent one. There were other ways to find out who was behind an LLC. Public records, tax filings, business licenses. It would take time, but I had time. What I didn't have was patience. I decided to take a different approach. If I couldn't find Tyler and Vanessa, I'd make them come to me, or at least make them nervous enough to make a mistake. I started small. I filed a complaint with the state attorney general's office about the property sale. I claimed I'd been coerced into signing the documents and that the sale had been fraudulent. It was a long shot. The AG's office probably wouldn't do anything about it, but it would create a paper trail, a record of my claim. And if Tyler heard about it, it would let him know I wasn't staying quiet. Then, I filed a fraud report with my bank. I told them about the transfers I hadn't authorized. They said they'd investigate, but I knew how that would go. Tyler had used my credentials. He'd probably made sure everything looked legitimate. But again, it was a paper trail. Another crack in the facade. I also sent a certified letter to the law firm representing Clearview Holdings. I explained that I believed the sale of my building had been obtained under duress and that I intended to challenge it in court. I didn't have the money to actually file a lawsuit yet, but they didn't need to know that. Each of these things on its own was minor, inconvenient at best, but together they were a pattern, a signal. I was coming for them, and I wanted them to know it. The news story changed everything. Within 2 days, I got a call from a lawyer I didn't know. His name was Michael Brennan, and he said he'd seen the segment. He worked for a firm that specialized in financial crimes and elder fraud. "I think we can help you," he said. "And I think we can make your son pay for what he did." "I already have a lawyer." "I'm sure you do. But does she have experience with cases like this? Cases that involve multiple states, shell companies, and sophisticated fraud schemes?" I didn't answer. "Here's what I'm offering," he said. "We'll take your case on contingency. That means you don't pay unless we win. And if we win, we'll get you everything back. The property, the money, all of it." What's the catch? No catch. We just take a percentage of whatever we recover. Standard practice. How much? 30%. I thought about it. 30% of 240,000 was 72,000. But 72,000 was better than nothing. And if Brennan could actually get my property back, it was worth it. All right, I said. Let's do it. He sent over a contract the next day. I signed it and sent it back. Then I waited. Brennan worked fast. Within a week, he'd filed a civil suit against Tyler and Vanessa. The complaint was 30 pages long and laid out everything: the fraudulent signatures, the property sale, the money transfers, the shell companies. He also filed a motion to freeze their assets. If the court granted it, Tyler and Vanessa wouldn't be able to access their bank accounts or sell any property until the case was resolved. I didn't know if the motion would work, but I liked the idea of them waking up one morning and finding out they couldn't touch their money. While Brennan handled the legal side, I kept working on the public side. I'd started a blog. Nothing fancy, just a simple site where I posted updates about the case. I shared the documents, the timeline, the news story. I wrote about what it felt like to be betrayed by your own child. The blog got more traffic than I expected. Hundreds of visitors a day. Some of them left comments. Most were supportive. A few accused me of being vindictive or airing dirty laundry. I didn't respond to any of them. I also got contacted by a podcast. True crime, they said. They wanted to do an episode about my story. I said no at first, but they kept pushing, and eventually I agreed. They sent me a list of questions. I recorded my answers and sent them back. The episode aired 2 weeks later. It was an hour long. They'd interviewed me, Brennan, and a financial expert who explained how exploitation schemes like Tyler's worked. They'd also tried to reach Tyler. He didn't respond. The episode got thousands of downloads. My blog traffic spiked. More people reached out with their own stories. It was overwhelming. And then I got a call from Vanessa. I didn't recognize the number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Hello? It's Vanessa. I didn't say anything. I know you're angry, she said, and I know you have every right to be. But this has to stop. Why? Because you're destroying us. Tyler can't get work. I can't get work. Our families won't talk to us. We're living out of a motel because we can't afford rent. Good. You don't mean that. I do. You're not thinking about what this is doing to you. All this anger, all this bitterness. It's eating you alive. You don't get to lecture me about bitterness. I'm not lecturing. I'm trying to help. You want to help? Give me back what you took. She was quiet for a moment. We can't. We don't have it. You spent $240,000 in a year? It's not that simple. The money went into investments, properties, business expenses. We can't just liquidate everything overnight. That's not my problem. It is your problem. Because if you keep pushing this, nobody wins. The lawsuit will drag on for years. Legal fees will eat up whatever you might recover. And in the end, you'll still be alone and angry. I'd rather be alone and angry than let you get away with this. Tyler's your son. Not anymore. She hung up. The next morning, I drove to Charlotte. It took 6 hours. I got there in the early afternoon and found the address. A row of townhouses, identical except for the numbers on the doors. Tyler's was at the end of the row. There was a car in the driveway, a Honda sedan. Not the kind of car Tyler would drive, which meant it probably belonged to whoever was letting him stay there. I parked across the street and waited. An hour passed, then 2. At 5 o'clock, the front door opened and Tyler walked out. He looked different, thinner, unshaven. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie, nothing like the polished image he used to project. He got into the Honda and drove away. I followed him, not close, just close enough to see where he was going. He drove to a strip mall and parked in front of a grocery store. I parked a few spaces away and watched as he went inside. I got out of my truck and followed. The store was busy, people with carts, kids running around, checkout lines backed up. I spotted Tyler in the produce section. He was picking through apples, looking for the best ones, like he had all the time in the world. I walked up behind him. Tyler. He spun around. For a second, he didn't recognize me. Then his face went pale. Dad, we need to talk. I don't have anything to say to you. Then just listen. He glanced around, like he was looking for an escape route. But there wasn't one. Not without making a scene. You've got 1 minute, he said. You owe me $375,000. I've recovered 40. Where's the rest? I don't have it. Yes, you do. You've got it hidden somewhere, and you're going to tell me where. I don't have to tell you anything. You're right. You don't. But if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone you know, everyone you meet, knows exactly what you did. I'll follow you. I'll ruin every relationship, every job, every opportunity you have. You'll never be able to start over. He stared at me. You're insane. Maybe, but I'm also right. He set the apple down. Even if I wanted to give you the money, I can't. It's tied up, investments, real estate. I can't just liquidate it. Then you'd better figure it out, because I'm not going away. The court already ruled. You got your judgment. What more do you want? I want you to feel what I felt. I want you to lose everything. You already took everything. Not yet. I walked away before he could respond. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the satisfaction of seeing him cornered, desperate, scared. I got back in my truck and drove to a motel on the edge of town. I checked in and sat on the bed, staring at the wall. I'd crossed a line. I knew that. I'd confronted Tyler directly, something Brennan had told me not to do. If Tyler reported this, it could hurt my case. It could get me in trouble. But I didn't care. I was past caring. The next morning I went back to the townhouse. The Honda was still in the driveway. I parked down the street and waited. At 8 o'clock, Tyler came out. He looked like he hadn't slept. He got in the car and drove to a coffee shop. I followed. He went inside and ordered something. Then he sat down at a table near the window and pulled out his phone. I went in and sat down at the table next to his. He noticed me immediately. What are you doing? Getting coffee. You're harassing me. I'm drinking coffee. If that bothers you, you can leave. He stood up, but he didn't leave. He just stood there, staring at me, his face flushed with anger. You know what your problem is? He said. You can't let go. You can't accept that I'm not your little boy anymore, that I made my own choices. And now you're punishing me because I didn't live up to your expectations. My expectations were pretty low. Don't steal from me. That's all I asked. I didn't steal from you. I managed your affairs. I made decisions you couldn't make. You forged my signature. You sold my property. You took my money. I took care of you. I laughed. You really believe that, don't you? Yes. Then you're more delusional than I thought. He grabbed his coffee and walked out. I stayed where I was, sipping my own coffee, watching him through the window as he got in the car and drove away. I followed him again. This time, he drove back to the townhouse. I parked across the street and waited. He went inside and didn't come back out. I sat there for the rest of the day, watching, waiting. At some point, I realized I'd become the thing I'd accused Tyler of being. Obsessive, vengeful, willing to do whatever it took to win. But I didn't stop. As the sun went down, I saw movement in the townhouse window. Tyler, pacing back and forth, talking on the phone, gesturing wildly. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could guess. He was calling his lawyer, or maybe Vanessa, or maybe someone else who could help him get away from me. But there was no getting away, not anymore. At 9 o'clock, the front door opened. Tyler came out. He walked to the Honda, got in, and drove away. I followed. He drove fast, weaving through traffic like he was trying to lose me, but I kept up. He pulled into a parking garage downtown. I followed him in. He parked on the 3rd level and got out. I parked a few spaces away and got out too. "Why are you doing this?" he shouted. "Because you won't give me what you owe." "I told you I don't have it." "Then sell something. Liquidate an investment. I don't care how you do it. Just do it." "And if I don't?" "Then I keep following you. Keep showing up. Keep making your life hell." He walked toward me. For a second, I thought he might swing. But he didn't. He just stood there, breathing hard, his fists clenched. "You want to know the truth?" he said. "I don't regret what I did, not for a second. You were a burden, a weight around my neck, and I did what I had to do to cut you loose." "Then we're done here." I turned and walked back to my truck. I heard him shouting behind me, but I didn't look back. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. I didn't go back to the motel. I drove home. 6 hours in the dark, replaying the conversation in my head. Tyler had confirmed everything I'd known, but hadn't wanted to admit. He didn't feel guilty. He didn't regret it. He thought he'd been justified, and that meant there was no reconciliation, no path forward. Just this. War. I'd been home for 2 days when Brennan called. "Tyler filed a restraining order against you," he said. "Good." "Good?" "Mr. Hale, this is serious. He's claiming you've been stalking him, harassing him. He has photos of you outside his place in Charlotte. Witnesses who saw you following him." "I wasn't following him. I was trying to recover my money." "That's not how the court will see it. If the judge grants the restraining order, you'll have to stay at least 500 feet away from him at all times. If you violate it, you could go to jail." "Let me worry about that." "Mr. Hale, I'm not backing down, Michael, not now." He sighed. "The hearing is next week, in Charlotte. You need to be there." "I'll be there." He hung up. I spent the next few days preparing. I knew the restraining order would probably go through. Tyler had evidence, photos, witnesses, a timeline. It didn't matter that I'd been justified. Legally, I'd crossed a line. But I didn't care about the restraining order. I cared about what came next. The hearing was on a Thursday afternoon. I drove to Charlotte the night before and stayed at the same motel. The next morning, I met Brennan outside the courthouse. "Here's the deal," he said. "They're going to present their evidence. We'll argue that you were acting in good faith, trying to recover money owed to you. But honestly, it's a long shot. The judge is going to grant the order." "Fine." "Fine?" "Mr. Hale, once this order is in place, you can't go near Tyler. You can't contact him. You can't even be in the same city if he's there. If you violate it, you're looking at criminal charges." "I understand." We went inside. Tyler was already there with his lawyer. He didn't look at me. The judge came in and called the case. Tyler's lawyer went first. He presented photos of me outside the townhouse, at the coffee shop, in the parking garage. He called a witness, the guy Tyler was staying with, who testified that I'd been loitering outside his property for hours. Brennan tried to argue that I'd been exercising my legal right to locate Tyler in order to enforce the court judgment. But the judge wasn't buying it. "Mr. Hale," she said, looking at me, "I understand you're frustrated. I understand you feel you've been wronged. But this behavior is unacceptable. You can't take the law into your own hands. Your Honor, with respect, the law hasn't done much for me. That's not an excuse for harassment. I wasn't harassing him. I was trying to get back what he stole. That's what the legal system is for. The legal system ruled in my favor, and he still hasn't paid." She leaned back in her chair. "I'm granting the restraining order. You are to stay at least 500 feet away from Tyler Hale at all times. You are not to contact him, directly or indirectly. You are not to go to his place of residence or employment. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel came down. Outside, Brennan was furious. "You couldn't just keep your mouth shut?" She asked me a question. "And you made yourself look like a vindictive lunatic." "I don't care how I look." "Well, you should. Because now Tyler has legal protection, and if you go near him again, you're done. I'm already done. I walked away before he could respond. I didn't go back to the motel. I drove straight home. I was done with Charlotte, done with Tyler, done with the legal system that had failed me at every turn, but I wasn't done with revenge. Over the next few weeks, I focused on what I could control. I couldn't go near Tyler, but I could make sure the rest of his life fell apart. I started reaching out to his old colleagues, the people he'd worked with before he disappeared. I told them what he'd done. I sent them the court documents, the news articles, the podcast episode. Some of them didn't care, but some did. And word spread. Tyler's name became toxic. Nobody wanted to work with him. Nobody wanted to hire him. I heard through the grapevine that he'd tried to start consulting again, but clients backed out once they found out who he was. I also kept digging into his finances. The forensic accountant had traced some of the money to offshore accounts, but it was locked up in investments we couldn't touch without going through another lengthy legal process. Brennan said it wasn't worth it. The cost of pursuing it would outweigh what we'd recover, but I didn't care about the cost. I cared about making Tyler hurt. One night, I got an email from Rachel Tan. Subject line: "You should see this." I opened it. It was a link to an article. Local news in Charlotte. The headline read, "Local man arrested for fraud." I clicked the link. Tyler had been arrested. According to the article, he'd been running a scheme where he posed as a financial advisor and convinced people to invest in fake properties. He'd taken money from at least 3 victims before someone reported him to the police. The article included a mugshot, Tyler looking haggard and defeated. I read the article twice. Then I leaned back in my chair and laughed. He'd done it to himself. He'd tried to rebuild using the same tactics that had worked on me, and he'd gotten caught. Now he was facing criminal charges, fraud, theft, maybe even jail time. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt nothing. The next day, Brennan called. "Did you see the news?" "Yeah. This changes things. If Tyler's convicted, it'll be easier to recover the money. The court can order restitution as part of his sentence." "How long will that take?" "Depends. Could be months, could be years. I don't care anymore." "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm done. I got what I wanted. Tyler's life is over. That's enough." Brennan was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure?" "Yeah. Send me the final bill. We're done." I hung up. I thought I'd feel different. Relieved, maybe, or satisfied. But I just felt tired. The anger that had driven me for months was gone, replaced by a kind of hollow emptiness. I spent the next few days trying to figure out what to do with myself. I'd spent so much time focused on Tyler that I'd forgotten how to do anything else. Work didn't interest me. Friends I'd neglected didn't call. My house felt too big and too quiet. One afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where my father was buried. I hadn't been there in years. I found his headstone and sat down on the grass next to it. "I got the compass back," I said, and I made him pay. The wind picked up, rustling the trees around me. I don't know if it was worth it. I sat there for a long time, waiting for some kind of answer. But there wasn't one. Just the wind and the silence and the weight of everything I'd done. Eventually, I stood up and walked back to my truck. I drove home and sat on my porch, watching the street. Kids playing, dogs barking, normal life. And I realized I didn't know how to be part of it anymore.